So the first thing I wanted to do is thank Gibson's for hosting the reading and for being our Concord bookstore. I was saying to Elizabeth earlier that I didn't get a chance to go back and count today, but with the libraries being closed during COVID, I think I probably ordered over 100 books from Gibson's from the time the pandemic started until now. Always picking up at least 3 books a week usually. And so I'm just so grateful you guys are there. And it's just you're such a good community partners.
Well, thank you. That is a really nice thing to hear. I will say welcome to everybody else in our audience tonight. This is Gibson's Bookstore Remote. I am Elizabeth, as Erica said, and I am the events coordinator at Gibson's Bookstore. And we are very pleased to welcome Erica Bodwell here tonight as she is presenting Crown of Wild from Two Sylvia's Press, I believe, is the...
Two Sylvia's Press.
Is the publisher. We do have this book available in Gibson's Bookstore, and you'll be popping in later to scribble and sign in a couple copies for us. We do ship. We are available for limited browsing in the store, and we do still offer curbside pickup very happily. We are very happy to help you out so that you don't have to come into the store if you don't want to. So thank you for everybody joining us here tonight. Erica, tell me a little bit about Crown of Wild.
So this book won the Two Sylvia's Press Wilder Prize, and that is named after Laura Ingalls Wilder because she published her first book after the age of 50. And so the prize was for women over 50 writers. So this is my first full-length manuscript, and I'm just really excited to share it with you guys. The release date was September 1st, like many authors in the pandemic.
So so to our audience at home, if you have any questions for Erica, you can put them into the chat sidebar or the Q&A, and we will be answering them in the second half of the event. So what was your inspiration behind collecting this volume of verse together? How do you start that?
Because it's my first book, I mean, it's kind of the way that I work, and I wonder if a lot of poets work that way, is you just write poems, and you might write poems for a couple of years, and eventually you come along to say, oh, I have about 70 poems, or I have about 50 poems, and maybe I should start to pull them together into a manuscript. And then you start working on looking for themes and looking for connections, and that's how this book came together. So it wasn't pre-planned. It was kind of like, oh, what do I have? And then I could see all the different threads. The book arcs, it's an arc of addiction and recovery. It's an arc of broken to healed or something like that. It has lots of themes like that in it. There's a lot of hair in this book. I realized even after the whole manuscript was pulled together, how much hair is in this book. Barrettes, curling irons, cutting hair, braiding hair, French braiding. That was one of the things when I put all the poems together, I was so surprised. I was like, oh, wow, there's a lot of hair in this book. So, yeah.
Does hair have particular meaning in this case?
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's, I would say that this is a feminist book, and it's certainly a female book, I would say. And hair has always been, I don't know, it's always been something that I was going to say it's been really important to me, but that's not what I mean. I just think dealing with my hair, should I cut it? Shouldn't I cut it? Should I curl it? Shouldn't I curl it? Dealing with your hair in high school when you can't get it right, and the bad haircut, and just hair and women seems like a big thing.
It seems fraught.
Yeah.
One's life with hair is fraught, and it brings up lots of emotions. So which one channels into poetry? Do you have a particular way that you go about creating a poem? Do you sit down with an idea? Does something pop into your head and you tumble it around in your head until it comes out on paper? How do you start a poem?
Yeah, so poems come from reading other poems. That's usually where they start. So whatever I'm reading usually ends up in my poetry. And otherwise, I might hear a line somewhere, or it might be something that I see, an image that I jot down, or something like that. So it's usually from what I've been reading, but sometimes it's just from something I've seen. But generally, for me, it comes from it's not. I'm not sitting there making something up. I don't generally have I have an idea, and now I'm going to write a poem about that idea. It's generally a line or something that triggers associations with other things and ends up turning into a poem. So,
would you like to read some of your poems for us this evening?
yeah. So I think what I thought I would do is I have maybe about 15-20 minutes of poems from Crown of Wild that I'll read. And then I don't know if we can take a break or if there'll be any questions. And then I have about 4 new poems to read that'll take, maybe about 6 or 7 minutes. I'm in so many meetings all day long on Zoom and things like that I'm always like, here's exactly how long it's going to take, and this is exactly what we're going to do, so you know exactly where we're going, and you're not, stuck on the screen all day. So that's what I thought I would do.
Makes sense to me. Please share your verse with us.
Okay, so apropos of the conversation we just had, this first poem is called I Cut My Long Hair. I cut my long hair, cut summer wild away. Tangled within, I found remnants of burned out stars, lone starling, and some leftover mosquitoes. I cut my long hair. It was time to put away wildish things. No longer could I pile heaps of hair on top of my head, crown of wild, crown of feral. I stopped washing myself clean in streams, blueberries shriveled on the bush, soap and razors, steel and plastic. I gathered tresses, nest of Milky Way and glitter, grouse feather, small cairn. I swept the nest from the house. I abandoned my wild. I locked the door. So that's just the beginning of some of the hair poems in this book. This next poem is called Camp 1979. The other thing that appears a lot in this book, there's a lot of forest and a lot of being out in the woods, a lot of being at summer camp, a lot of camping, sleeping outside, that kind of thing. This is called Camp 1979. She sits on the splintered wooden steps alone. The smell of wet canvas mixes with a breeze off the lake. Behind her, 6 cots, striped mattresses, cottony and thick. She lays out her plaid sleeping bag, dislodges a scab and brings it to her mouth, watches them retreat. Mother, stepfather, stray younger siblings. Her little sister's hair flies up and a tiny butterfly barrette drops to the dirt. Flat on her back on the slatted platform, she stares at cobwebs lacing the peaked frame, seeping beads of dew, dark speckles of mold. A daddy longlegs walks across her thighs. She considers pinching him up by one leg and chucking him out the back, as she will hundreds of times that month at the request of squealing tent mates. Soon the lunch gong will ring and she'll stand, grind the barrette into the ground with her heel, take her seat in the dining hall, wake at midnight for a starry swim. She lets him move along. So I think the speaker in this book is trying to be a pretty fierce girl, and she likes to think of herself as pretty tough and as a tomboy. And this next poem is called Ode to the Yellow Sparkle Snare Drum. Power sparkler, noisemaker, percussive silencer of sisters. I'll stand on tiptoes to pound you, slam you, slap you, tighten your tension rods, snap your snare head. I'll carry sticks hard and long for you. You saved me from the flute and its case like a doll's casket, from tiny boxes of thin reeds that splinter like envy, from white plastic chairs in the wind section. Silver circled dazzler, I'll snap my sticks into the clip screwed to your hoop. slide you into the plush red of your slick hard case, keep you from dust and snakes. Oh, yellow sparkle snare drum, thank you for giving me a reason to walk with weapons. The other thing about this book is I do have a pretty extensive notes section in the back. And I think another place, Elizabeth, that I pull poems from is from like so many people. I mean, it's not just me, but like from current events or things I read in the news or things that trigger associations with me from things in the news. And this next poem is called "Things Said to a Teenage Girl at the Dojo." And this poem was sparked from the there was a sexual abuse scandal with the U.S. women's gymnastics team, and back in 2016, the quote that I put in the notes of the book from NPR was, "Over the course of 2 decades, at least 368 gymnasts have alleged they were sexually assaulted or exploited by adults working in the sport." So this poem is called "Things Said to a Teenage Girl at the Dojo." Always use your opponent's weight against him. You look fat. We're going to call you Fat Chance. Let him fall into you, then step aside. I can give you a ride home. Here's how to fall. Word around the club is you're a virgin. Just let yourself crumple. Wash your feet. You're disgusting. You're definitely Olympics material if you drop 2 weight classes. Hop up into my arms. You can work out with the adults if you like. Use your forearms to smack the mat. I'll hold you upside down from the knees. 50 sit-ups now. We're having a party. You're the only junior invited. You mean to tell me you can't double jump? Just inhale and resist the urge to cough. Barbara is such a bitch. Never get married. Want to hear a joke? Did Tommy put those bruises on your thigh? How do you make a hormone? Take your hands off that apple. Don't pay her. Barbara's going to visit her sister in Puerto Rico. I'll teach you arm bars, but don't tell anyone. It's illegal. You need to put in some extra training time. How the hell did you gain 8 pounds in 5 days? Here, pull these Sudafed capsules apart and chew them. I made you. I can unmake you. This next poem is called "Welcome to Permanence," and it's after a phenomenal poet, young woman poet named Morgan Parker. And she's written 3 books now. The last one she wrote was called Magical Negro, and I believe it was nominated for a National Book Award or a National Book Critics Circle Award. And she also wrote a book called "That There Are Things More Beautiful Than Beyonce." And she wrote a poem called "Welcome to the Jungle." And I took the form for this poem from that poem. This is called "Welcome to Permanence." I always wanted children. I mean, the idea of children. I mean, people smiling at my pregnant belly on the street. My 23rd summer, I rode the Long Island Railway into Manhattan every day. The girls on the train, I mean women, held their left hands out into the aisle. Their fingers sparkled. I wanted to get married. I mean, join their conversation, touch shoulder to shoulder. I mean, not be alone. By the end of that summer, I'd lost 15 pounds, binged on Saks chocolate every day, sucked on the fingers of a 3rd-year associate, delivered a muffin to the pregnant girl in the stairwell. By the end of that summer, I had the ring. I mean, a focal point. The ladies on the train started saving me a seat. The wedding was planned. I was pregnant. I mean, the lid was nailed shut. I mean, from the inside. And that form that Morgan uses there is, it's got a lot of anger in it, and it's a good form for that. Oh, people are saying they can't get in, Elizabeth. Bummer. Okay. Oh, well. Okay, so the next poem is called...
Are they saying they can't get in through Eventbrite or Zoom?
Yeah, it says you don't have, a couple of people are saying you don't have access to this event.
I will take a look.
Thanks. Her name is Megan Quinn. Anyway, sorry about that. I just wanted people to get here if they could. The next poem is called Obad, in which grace appears. And there are several obads in this book. I would say 6 or 7. And Obad is a morning poem. It's a poem of the dawning day. And I like to think the hope for the dawning day. And I think the way the obads function in this book is just about maybe a speaker who is waking up. So it's Obad, in which grace appears. We were damaged. We hurt people. We were called selfish so many times we figured what the fuck and slid the last piece of steak from our grandmother's plate. We stole pints of rum raisin even though the raisins thawed and spread like sticky insects on our tongues. We took it out on each other, oldest to youngest, until the dog got a bonnet tied so tight his eyes bugged out. We grew up and left that place, refugees. We acquired husbands, student loans, a penchant for carving letters lightly into our forearms, kittens that kept coming. We left lovers and pickup trucks to race home and open cans, scratch under wishbone chins. We got therapy. We went for walk after walk in the woods. We filled the sink with hot water and washed dishes every day. We stacked folding chairs, jiggled our knees when we sat, that sober standing before a chain link fence, pressing our foreheads to the grid. We were sorry and said so, and after a while, our wheels ground to a gravelly stop. We didn't know any better, and then we did. And just to counterbalance my poem, Welcome to Permanence, which seemed kind of grim about being pregnant, I would offer this poem, which is called Child Mother. And my book is dedicated to my 2 sons, Jordan and Matthew, and my dedication is who taught me how to be less careless with my life. So this poem is called Child Mother. This child who started as autumn leaves blown against the house, paper crane with a secret code folded inside, dream from which I believed I'd awaken untroubled to the old landscape, as easily as setting out milk for stray kittens. This child who emerged from my sliced-through womb as flame flickering in a liminal space, threatening to be extinguished. When the nurse waiting at the ER doors lifted him from my arms, I collapsed on the sidewalk, twigs flattened underfoot, the vibrating ground echoing my lone beating heart. Who would teach me how to be less careless with my life? Oh, good, Megan got in. Yay. Okay, just a few more poems from the book. So this next poem, back to the theme. For this reading, I picked the theme of the hair because I thought it would be fun. So this poem is called Meditation with Starlings and Curling Iron. Outside my window, a flock of starlings alights in the hawthorn tree. Garnet rains down, a feast for the taking. Iridescent black feathers shimmer in unison against snow-covered ground. Are they preening or just cold? Which one is most desired? I own a curling iron for the first time since 7th grade. Can make my hair fall in loose waves, gather oohs and ahs, a bird hoarding berries. Hot hiss of heat-scorched strands recalls winter walks to middle school with wet head, retractable curling wand plugged into girl's bathroom wall. How I worshipped that totem of heat and metal, its sizzle, its smoke. How I longed for places to store my fear, nests of stories I told myself, weighing X pounds, weighing Y pounds. 30 years on, I twist my thick, overwashed locks into submission, touch wand to forehead and recoil, scattering bobby pins. All at once, the starlings lift from the ground, a red welt blooms. Perhaps a storm is coming. Perhaps a storm has passed. And the just two more poems from the book. This cover painting, the cover of the book, was painted by my father, who died when I was a year ago, and this was such an incredible opportunity to collaborate with him. This is the one surviving painting of the paintings he made. Obviously, he was an artist and a painter, and died when he was 28. And then we had a house fire after that, after he had died, and most of his paintings burned up in that fire. But there's one that survived, which is hanging on my living room wall, and my editors thought, yeah, that would make a great book cover. And also, with Yom Kippur coming, I thought this poem would be appropriate. This is Tulips. Today I miss my father, 50 years past his death, 50 years past my birth. No, I miss the idea of my father, a story I conjure from photos and letters, his Ray-Bans, his motorbike, his splintered English. Today I forgive my mother, the way she hated the long line of decapitated tulips in the yard, the way she laid the Christmas table with poinsettias and sterling, how she threw open the door to a Gentile stepfather. Today I love the 5 a.m. light, the photons themselves, discrete packages of leaping electrons. Yesterday's summer fuck, I love it for its sweaty slickness, its earthy lack of agenda. I love time itself, how it prevents everything from happening at once. I love those fearless birds that skitter courtyards, alighting on tables. Generations churned through time's engine until wildness has been smoothed to the flatness of beach rock. 50 years on, I still dream a parallel world. Seder plate, haricot replete with dates and figs. My mother's head dipping low to light the candles. And in his chair, week's end weary, tie loosened and shirt sleeves rolled to elbow, my father telling me to sit still. And the last poem that I'll read from the book, there's a woman named Kayla Mueller, who was the first female hostage of ISIS, first American female hostage of ISIS, I should say. And she was captured in Syria in 2013, and she died, I believe, in 2016 in a bombing. She never was released. And the book has several poems that are dedicated to her. I think she functions in the in this book as the speaker's twin, who probably who didn't get out alive. This is called Torch Song for Kayla Mueller. Had she lived, she'd know the difference between true and magnetic north, what declination means. She wouldn't fear the compass's mathematical face, its 4 life-saving directions, needle a quivering blade, earth's coded truth. She'd know man or bear might appear, and still, she'd turn her attention to staking her tent, gathering tinder to coax the first licks of flame from the forest. She'd carry her own knife, fire starter, tweezers, duct tape, safety whistle, map. She'd always be prepared for who might come. Unafraid, she'd spend the night alone among the black flies and wild blueberries, calculate the angle of the fallen sun. She'd walk with strength ungendered, as if her twinned world existed, as if she conjured it. So I think that's it from that book. I think we could take a little break or see if there's a question.
We did actually have some questions. If anybody would like to ask some questions, go ahead and type those into our chat sidebar or into our Q&A. Or if you would like to speak, there is a raise hand function. Ashley wants to know, do any of your poem inspirations come from your yoga practice?
Hi, Ashley. Shout out to Ashley, who's sounds like has been doing an amazing job in the pandemic with Blossom Yoga on Main Street. Yeah, I do have a poem that comes from my yoga practice. And since you asked, I think I will read it, Ashley, if I can find I don't have it with me. Maybe I can pull it up if I have a minute. But you know what, Ashley, this is what I'm gonna do, because I had pre-planned poems. I'm gonna send it to you, but I actually have a poem called Drought Practice that that actually is all about a yoga practice. It literally goes through the entire yoga practice. And I thought about reading it tonight, and it was kind of like, it's hard to read, synovial fluid, this and that. But I have other poems that come from my yoga practice, and I think that a lot of my poetry carries sort of the spirit and the meditative sense of having a practice, like a yoga practice. That's a good question.
So you mentioned that there was a character in this book. Is it a singular character or voice that you imagined, or are there multiple? Is this a nebulous character, or did you have a fully fleshed out character or voice that you were imagining as you wrote this?
There's a single speaker in this book, and she spoke to me. You know, the poems kind of wrote themselves, and along the way she spoke to me. I think that Kayla Mueller, which I don't know if anyone has ever heard of her, but she really, the speaker in this book really connected with imagining what Kayla was going through when she was in captivity. And that wasn't something that I expected, or obviously. So that was fun, but it's definitely a single speaker.
Some poets say that poetry helps them process situations and emotions. Do you do that? Use poetry to help process? And if you do you end up feeling like you've gone through catharsis, or are your emotions even more amplified once you've had to process them?
That's an interesting question. I think, and my friend Gail and I, who's another poet, we're just talking about this today. I think what happens to me in writing poetry, maybe I'm processing emotions, but I think the poem is teaching me something I didn't know. And I've been playing around lately with the tarot deck, and I'm finding that tarot is like very similar to that. It's not really predicting the future or magical or anything to me, but it's like, it's bringing up, it helps you kind of imagine your way into things you might already know. And so I think that writing poetry, it doesn't get me more amped up or make my emotions any particularly, it has an effect that maybe a prayer or a meditation practice might have. It has the effect of a practice, and the poems often surprise me and maybe teach me something that I didn't know, or I didn't know consciously. Yeah.
Do you have favorite poems or poets that you look to in times when you're stuck?
Yeah, there's a poet. Yes, I have tons of favorite poets. There's a poet named Jack Gilbert who I think he was writing poems probably in the 50s, 60s, 70s. He is a poet that, again, my friend and I were talking about a poem he wrote that is a classic. It's called A Brief for the Defense. And it's a poem that in a time like this is really helps you, you know, because he is talking about times of war, times of famine, horrible times, but just how people are still joking in the fields and living their lives. And I think that's one way that poetry can function. I think poetry can function politically, it can function emotionally, it can be love poems, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, he's a favorite, and many more. I mean, there's just so many incredible poets writing today. I gotta get a list so that I can just rattle it off. Morgan Parker's one. Yeah, so.
When you were a child, was poetry important to you? Or if it wasn't, at what age did you discover poetry? Both reading and then also the other side of that, were you always a poet? Or did you read poetry first and then discover you have poems in you?
That is such a good question. I was not always a poet, and I did not really read much poetry as a kid, except for, maybe one or two books of poems that were just from, I mean, I don't know if anyone knows the actress Ali Sheedy, but she wrote a book of poems that I'll never forget when I was a kid. But the way that I started writing poetry, I knew I always wanted to write, and I was trundling along like a lot of people who become poets do, that I've learned, trying to write fiction, trying to write short stories, trying to write prose. And I went to a reading at the Concord City Auditorium, and this was a good 20 years ago or more. And it was the poet Lucille Clifton, who's since passed, and she's a wonderful, wonderful poet, and the poet Maxine Kumin. Oh, Roxanne Selezzer, Ali Sheedy book. Yesterday I Saw the Sun. That was the name of the book. I still have mine too, Roxanne. Anyway, so I saw Maxine Kumin, who's a very famous New Hampshire poet who won the Pulitzer Prize, so on and so forth. And it was the first live poetry reading I had ever been to. And it was at the Concord City Auditorium. And when I heard those two poets read in person, and I heard it orally, something clicked. And I just started, it was like the beat or the music or the rhythm came into my head, and I just started writing poetry, and was very bad at it for a very long time. It's a lot to learn. So
I mean, I would be quite shocked if you just jumped out of the gate and you were immediately good at it. That would be practically suspicious.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to take your knocks and learn, I mean, you have to go through the steps to learn how to construct a poem. Not that there's just one way to write a poem, but mistakes show you where the path forward is.
Oh, yeah. Yep. You have to be able to fail, and you have to be very used to rejection. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of rejection.
And arguably, you learn more from your mistakes than your successes.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to, for about 2 years, a little bit longer, I've been trying to learn how to draw and take art classes and things like that. And it's just the same thing. It's just.
Do you learn well, or are you one of those people like myself that when you're not immediately good at something, you get very frustrated? Or are you one of the people who is capable of learning how to learn?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good at learning how to learn, I think, but only because it can get pretty dire if you don't have any reaction, I've been writing poetry seriously for 8 years now, and I spent the first 4 wondering whether every single poem I wrote was good. Was it really a poem? Is this a poem? Is it good? And the solution to that was to just start sending them out. And you would send out 50 poems and get 5 or 2 accepted. But just having a little bit of success was helpful with that. But yeah, I'm pretty good. I've never been somebody who's like, oh my God, I have to do it perfectly first. But it takes, you really have to it's hard to realize you have to put your time in, like with anything, right? Like with your career, or with learning to play a sport, or with learning to do anything, you don't realize until you're so far into it that you got to put your time in. It's hard for a while.
So I guess I would ask for people who are watching, what is the path to publishing, but how does one go about finding a publisher and bringing your first scribblings into a book?
So yeah, that's such an important topic too. I think it's easy. From what I've heard, it's easier because nowadays you can submit online. But I learned from a friend that I had been in a poetry workshop with, and we started a writing group out of that poetry workshop. And she sort of taught us the ropes about how to submit. And it's kind of like you have to get in writing groups and places with other people. There's lots out there on the web and how to get your book published and everything like that. But I think it really helps if you can get in a writing group or something with, in the case of poetry, with poets that are a little further along the road. I mean, they don't have to have a book, but if they're a little further down the road, and I feel like I've been doing some work And I feel like I'm a little further down the road. You know, I'm not the authority, I'm not the world, I'm not the greatest success, whatever, but I have a little bit of experience that I can pass on to other people the way that my friends passed it on to me. So I think in the poetry world, it's small enough that you can really connect that way. Yeah.
So would you like to read your new poems for us? I will remind
Yeah.
our audience members that Gibson's Bookstore does have Crown of Wild available. Erica will be coming down and scribbling your signature in them for us. And we do ship, we do curbside pickup, or you can just pop in and browse our shelves. Please share some of your new work with us.
Yeah, so I have 4 poems that I want to share that are new poems written in the last year, and obviously aren't in the book. So the first poem is called I Quit TV. I have a series of these I Quit poems, and they came out over the course of a residency that I did at Mass MoCA with this group of poets called the Boiler House Poets, that I was lucky enough to get invited to this group of 7 other women who had been meeting for 5 years. And it was a revelatory week, being at Mass MoCA, using their studios, having an apartment, spending a week with these poets and just writing poems. And so this series of poems came out of that time, and it's very close to my heart. So this one is called I Quit TV. I quit TV, and the crossing guard with his crank radio didn't care. Comcast didn't care. We kept cable for sports, for boys. The household didn't care, but was happy to have dinner every night. I quit TV, and hours of evening unfurled at my feet, arrows pointing to read, rest, pointing away from the actress having sex with her coworker while her husband sleeps in the glow of the baby monitor, biting her bee-stung lip like a little girl, selling dime bags of pot before it was legal, cooler than cool and so fuckable. Sorry, let me close that door. I quit TV and borrowed a book from the library. The Body is Not an Apology. And although I have been at the task of untangling myself from lines and hooks for decades, still, I read it as an anthropologist would, as someone who hadn't seen 100,000 images of women and girls in stilettos. I quit stilettos. Bomber jackets borrowed from boyfriends. I quit bomber jackets. Flannel shirts long over short skirts, fishnets. I quit fishnets. Nude lip gloss, bronzer. I quit lip gloss. As if I were someone who'd never erased herself with the performance of pierced ears and tan lines. I quit tan lines. I quit TV long after I quit making out in trucks with men not my husband. Long after the baby monitors were sold at yard sales. Long after I stopped biting hooks, stopped casting lines. Arigato miwaku, Basho would say, as he hiked through villages, accumulating gifts he could not humanly carry. Thanks, but no thanks. I quit TV, more air, a little less bait in the bucket. I miss them, those hours pretending I could free myself. I quit pretending from myself. Though I love the apple trees in the backyard and sitting under them and the ceiling of sky. So this next poem, I'm a mother of boys, and one of the best things that has happened to me as they have grown up has been the women that they have brought into this household. It's just such a treat to get to know these young women that are their girlfriends, and have a little, have some girl energy in this house, and also have the chance to, I don't exactly have daughters, but something like it. It's just pretty sweet. I have a lot of women in their 20s in my life, and I'm so grateful for that. So this poem is called Love is Not a Pie. Love is not a pie, I tell myself. And so I help him tie yard-gathered daisies with linen ribbon, agree that yes, a pint of gin and berries brought to meet her family dinner would make a good impression. A certain type of mama, a mama of just boys, can spin her own solar system, and with dinner after dinner, turn their little boy faces toward her, magnetized planets orbiting her warming sun. And when all the middle school dances and curving corner kicks and late nights of AP math turn out a muscled and hesitant man courting a mountain biking, sure of herself woman who lives across town and wears dresses with pockets, when he says, I'm just trying to be the man who someone doesn't want to break up with, of course I make pesto and pasta. Of course I step to one side and take in his good fortune in mine, root for him as he bends the heavenly body of himself toward her, this new, brightly burning star in our family galaxy, light, beauty. That one's like a little tough to get through without choking up. So two more. This next poem is called I Met a Girl and Sparks Flew. I met a girl and sparks flew from her fingertips to my fingertips, ran up my wrists, elbows, followed the blazes of my shoulder blades, then threaded each rib's rung, surfed swells of hip flexors, the rise and fall of each quadricep, circled the small coin of each kneecap, then dropped like an anchor to land hard at my Achilles before climbing each foot's arch, and flowed from my 10 toes back into her toes, wound around the planes of her shins, hills of her calves, followed each hamstring, the abundant rise of cheeks to join at her tailbone into a wide, willow-banked river that flowed up her spine through her heart's midline and into her mouth, where it pooled and waited until I leaned across the garden bench, put my hands in her hair, and kissed her there among the lupins. And then the last one, this poem, I just literally, it's a little drafty, as we like to say. It's very, very new, but I thought it would be appropriate, this drought. Of all the things we have to worry about, that's another one. It's called Rain Soon. With each run of the faucet in this summer of severe drought, I'm grateful. And for each scoop of dog food trucked from God knows where, grateful. For each mid-September cherry tomato, picked, still yellow but hopeful, grateful. Each walk in the turning woods where blue sky backgrounds deep green, grateful. For the dying down of the West Coast winds and the dissipation of the haze that hitched a ride cross-continent on the jet stream, grateful. For the sound of a pound of beans hitting the bottom of a steel bowl like a downpour. For the soaking water and its second life quenching the thirst of the herb bed, I'm grateful. For the tip from the owner of New Hampshire Naturals, the supply chain will break down again in the fall. For the 50 pounds of rice he procured in 2 paper sacks, grateful. For the pandemic's return of not only our oldest, but his lovely girlfriend. For the dinner she makes while I catch up on episodes of King of the Hill, so grateful. For the way a friend, when I'm taking a sanity break from the media, also grateful, answers my text, what's the fire news? With, in Oregon, rain soon, so grateful. Rain soon. That's it.
That's it. That's the last one. Those were great. Are those for your next collection?
Yes, yep.
Are you imagining a different character?
I think it probably, that's a really good question. If it'll be a single speaker, I don't know yet. It's a book that is, it's a manuscript that's coming together, like, I don't know how it couldn't be, right? But that's very concerned with all the things, climate collapse in particular, pandemic, food worries, etc. But it's also got a good number of love poems, so there's that.
Even there's love in the time of COVID, so.
There you go.
That should be your
Perfect.
title right there. That's your working title.
That'll be my next title.
So thank you very much for joining us this evening and sharing your volume of verse with us. Crown of Wild is available from Gibson's Bookstore. We are very happy to sell it to you. Thank you, Erica, for joining us this evening.
Thanks, everybody.
We hope to see you in the store soon. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks all my friends for coming. Thank you. Bye-bye.